I'll get started. We're going to continue to welcome folks into this conversation as they join, but in the interest of time, we have a very brief hour together. I'd like to welcome everybody to Canopy Strategic Partners Understory webinar. My name is Elise Bernardoni, and I am the Director of Engagement. I'm joined on this webinar by Liza Summers, who is our Marketing Associate, and Lori Perkins, who is our Vice President. Before we launch into today's topic, which is strategies for job seeking and networking, I'd like to give you just a few brief housekeeping notes. The first is that we are recording this, and we will be sharing this on our social with our masses once it's up and ready to go. So if you prefer to have your face off camera, that's absolutely fine. If you're comfortable having it on camera, we'd love to see your expressions and just sort of see what you're thinking and feeling in real time. We do want this to be a conversation with our panelists. So while we have some stock questions ready to go, we really want you, our audience, to be engaging with us and having conversations with one another and with our panelists. So feel free to take yourself off mute and ask questions at any time. If you're more comfortable putting them into the chat, that's a great place as well. Liza will be monitoring the chat and asking questions from time to time. That's also a great place for you all to engage with one another. Finally, let's see, I think that's actually everything on my list. Great, we also welcome you to respond to each other. So a little bit about this webinar. Why this webinar right now? Well, Canopy is committed to helping folks who are either looking for new career opportunities or new into their careers in their leadership journeys. And we are about to come into the Association of Zoos and Aquariums annual conference, which for those of you who have not been before is a massive conference where a lot of us dust off our resumes, brush up on our networking skills, look for jobs, look for new folks to talk to, look to build our professional networking. So this is a great time to be having this conversation as we move into that. This is also a time when new people are joining the workforce. So we've got young folks who are just coming out of college or grad school. You know, they're looking for jobs as well and maybe thinking, where am I supposed to go? So we are here to offer resources and opportunities for them. And then finally, kids are all going back to school. And those of you with parents might have a little bit of an additional sort of mental bandwidth to be thinking about, what's my next career opportunity? Where do I want to go? Either, you know, leveling up within the place I'm at right now or looking for a new job. So this is a perfect time to be having this conversation. Canopy is, as I mentioned, really committed to ensuring that women, and especially women and people of color, have opportunities within their careers to grow and advance in a supported environment. So I wouldn't be a good facilitator if I didn't put up a couple of slides and talk to you very briefly about some of the research that we've done in recent years. I'm going to try to keep it short. I'm super passionate about it. So Liza, if I talk too long, just sort of like tell me to cool it. So very briefly, in I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to bigify this. Here we go. Great. So very briefly, for the past 10 plus years, Canopy Strategic Partners has been really supporting women and people of color in their leadership journeys, specifically around Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It went backwards. It's going in the wrong direction. Nope, just kidding. Okay, great. In 2022, we decided to sort of take all of this anecdotal information that we had been gathering from clients, from colleagues, and put this sort of anecdotal idea into a research study, investigating the different types of barriers for women and people of color in leadership opportunities in zoos and aquariums. We say that this is specific to zoos and aquariums, but in reality, we think that that the findings from this can be extrapolated out into any cultural institution. So we are sharing it today just in the spirit of sort of getting everybody on a level playing field of where we're coming from. So we did a mixed method data analysis. We did a survey that was quantitative, and it was responded to by about 717 leaders in zoos and aquariums. We also did 12 focus groups for 80 participants to really gather that qualitative data and understand the sort of lived experiences of folks that were facing barriers of all sorts of varieties. I'm not going to get into all of the data for those. We'll plunk the links for the actual research project as well as the infographic into the chat. If you'd like to read it, you're welcome to, but I really want to sort of focus on the survey results. So what we learned is that by and large, folks were feeling like there were no positions, that there's real flat structure in a lot of our cultural institutions, that there's limited movement. There are difficult or no pathways into new opportunities. There might not be good planning on the organization's part. There might not be good succession planning. There might not be good just understanding of how you might be able to grow within a career. And then finally, there were very limited professional development opportunities. And what we heard most was that there was a lack of mentorship and a lack of sponsorship. And so what we heard from folks was that they really wanted mentors, professional development, and at a bigger level, organizational restructuring to facilitate upward mobility. So what we learned was that there are sort of two big buckets that we can work from. Leaders can be working to attract and hire for diversity, and that includes looking at the credentials needed for skills, offering paid internships and apprenticeships, being really clear about your wages and wage progressions within your organization, both for acquiring talent and maintaining your talent, and then advertise beyond AZA. We also looked at sort of growing and developing our own talent from within. So that for leaders could look like creating and communicating clear pathways for mobility, creating career pathways for those who aren't interested in leadership positions, but want to grow as an individual and as a professional, establishing mentors to provide advice and support, and also just being sponsors, which in the briefest sort of definition is opening the door for others and saying people's names in the room where it matters. We also talked a lot with our leaders and folks who are facing challenges around helping to develop the critical skills for effective leadership. And that includes clear communication, accountability, and sort of those like basic but really important leadership competencies. So we're sort of here today as Canopy. We wanted to put our research to practice, like I said. And so today we're going to be focusing on this strategies for creating networks and I'm going to actually take this off because now I can, let me stop sharing. So we'll be today talking about networking and job hiring and how you look for your next jobs. And this is a really important part of Canopy's work. We want to make sure that we're supporting all of you as you look for your next career or look to grow yourself in the career you're in. So that was an awful lot of talking from me. I'm going to put myself on mute and turn it over to Lori Perkins.
Thank you, Elise. That's a wonderful summary of the research. I hope you all will take advantage of checking out the research report. Liza popped the link in the chat, so feel free to save that link and check it out. We will continue to talk about, we did this work on barriers, but what we're interested in is giving people the tools to overcome barriers. And so that's what this webinar series is about and other pieces of our work. But I want to get to the panelists. So I am going to just very briefly tell you who they are, but then I will ask them each to tell you a bit more about themselves. And what I want to say to the panelists is you're all from very different backgrounds, right? And that was an intentional choice in asking you to join us. Something we noticed that you all have in common is the fact that you seem to have all been intentional in the way you have gone about your own personal professional development and seeking opportunities to grow yourself and your career. So what I'd like to do is ask each of you to sort of introduce yourself, say a little bit about who you are, and tell us a little bit about that journey. And then we'll get to the questions. Just briefly for our guests, our panelists are my good friend, Tiffaney McClendon, whose title I'll let her change it. I had an old title here, but she's moving on up at the Birmingham Zoo. We have Elee Wood, who's the CEO at the Imagine Children's Museum in Everett, Washington. And we have Kate Sizemore, who's the VP of People and Experience at Reingold, which is a communications firm, and she'll tell us more about that. Tiffaney, would you like to kick us off, my friend?
I am happy to do that. Thank you. For those I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Tiffaney McClendon. I am the newly appointed Director of Learning and Inclusion at Birmingham Zoo in Birmingham, Alabama. And I'm really excited about some of the challenges that come with that. But I've been at Birmingham Zoo for about 8 years now. The way I got here was very unconventional. I actually started with Birmingham Zoo as a temporary cashier, so a weekend cashier through a temp agency. So I was kind of dropped here by accident, but I stayed because of the people, the mission, the work that's being done, the culture, and the opportunity I saw to sort of determine what my passions were, figure myself out a little bit, and then have the opportunity to pursue those both within the organization and within the greater zoo and aquarium field, which was something that was really, really exciting and different than other organizations I had been a part of previous to that. So I love being part of zoos and aquariums and the opportunities that it provides to sort of expand my range, expand my knowledge, get to know so many people from so many different places, and learn and grow into sort of the goals that I developed for myself. So.
Thank you, Tiffaney. Well, what if we just go alphabetical, which will also give Elee time for a little more coffee. I know she's just getting started. Kate, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your PD journey?
Sure. Well, thank you everyone for the opportunity to spend some time with you today. Really excited to be here. I've been in the people field for more than 30 years, which is sort of frightening to think about, but my motto's always been, life is short, so find a job you love. And that's probably my biggest advice for folks who are considering a change or looking for, or actively looking for a new job. From a professional development standpoint, I started my career at the Walt Disney Resort and many, many years ago. And so when people ask, well, why would you leave Disney? It really was about professional development. It was a very different organization 30 years ago. And I learned a tremendous amount working there, but I felt like I wanted more. And I wanted to go back to school to get my master's degree. And the way that the 24/7 operation works at a theme park, there really was no opportunity to go back to school. So when I had the opportunity to leave the organization and go back to school full time and pursue my MBA, I took it. It was the best decision I ever made. And those decisions, while scary when you're making them, that piece of professional development has carried me so far, and really informed the rest of my career choices. And so I find myself today sort of having made the decision that I want to work for mission-focused organizations going forward. I've worked at huge companies and small companies and kind of found my sweet spot in the small to medium-sized company, but with the caveat that there must be a mission there that I connect with. And so I currently work for Reingold Incorporated, and we often say we have the soul of a nonprofit and government service, but our mission actually is written as our mission is yours. And so we take our clients' missions very seriously. So whether we are supporting the Veterans Administration with suicide prevention for our military veterans, or we're helping the US Census with the Herculean task of counting every American here. It's really part of the organization's soul, and that's why I really enjoy my job. It's relatively new. I love it. So really happy to see how I can help today and to connect with all of you.
Awesome. Thank you, Kate. And Elee.
I'm ready. Hi, everybody, especially people that I can see on the list that I know, including Anna Musa-Miller, who is a good friend. Really happy to be here and to be able to share. I am 87 days into my role as CEO at Imagine Children's Museum, and how I got here is kind of a you know, as all careers are, I think fair to say, a bit of a winding, twisting journey. But I started off my museum life as a volunteer in high school because my mom said, you need something to do over the summer. Nobody told me it was a career path, though, so I had to figure it out as I went on. But I ended up working in a children's museum out of college, and that really got me interested in reconnecting with my volunteer roots. Always been really interested in exhibits, interpretation, and education. Have gone back and forth between academia and museum practice. So I spent a time I like to call in professor land, teaching museum education, doing a lot of research and work on audiences and thinking about how we understand why people come to museums, what we do. So always in and out of education, but I have also worked with that gave me a lot of opportunity to work with all kinds of museums and see all kinds of different aspects of our field. And then I have found my way back into practice. Took a spin at the Huntington Botanical Gardens Art Museum and Research Library. Really interesting and different kind of place where it brings it all together. And now here I am in the driver's seat, or in the captain's chair, as I've been liking to call it, and really interesting perspective on how to take all those things that I knew I wished somebody would have done for me as a leader, and now trying to figure out how I make them happen. So a lot of the ideas and the research that came out, I was like, yes, this is what I want to do. But it is really interesting to be in the driver's seat on that. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I love your backgrounds, and I love the serendipity that is in a lot of your backgrounds, right? That's, I think, something to pay attention to for people that, you know, you might be a weekend cashier at the zoo, but you don't know what that might lead to. I'm interested in your thoughts on how people can, what are ways that job applicants can really demonstrate what they've got, what their chops might be, when they might not have the background, right? They might not come into the organization with the degree or with having done the job or the apprenticeship or whatever, but there is the passion, there is the goal to have that kind of a career opportunity. How can people show the boss who they are?
I'm going to start with that because I've had a lot of interesting situations of late. One of the things that I think is really important, and I draw this out of a theater background, is trying to work with what's in front of you, but also um, not to take something exactly as written. So, and everybody's like, oh, should I have 2 pages on my resume, or should I, you know, can I do a third? And people get crazy crazy margins and everything. What's more important to me, what I have been looking for, is how you express yourself. And you can't always do that through your resume. So I really like cover letters. I like people being able to explain, this is who I am, this is what I've done in my past. It connects with what the job is, even if it's not necessarily exactly the same thing. You have a way of being able to show, here's how I see what you're saying you want, and here's how I approach that kind of work. And I think it's really unfortunate, especially as you are on entry level positions, you don't always get a chance to do that, especially if you're applying through weird places, or, you know, like just quick apply kinds of things. All they do is send your resume, and then you have nothing to show for it. And I think you've got to find a way to be able to show that without being annoying.
I agree. I would say that it's really about, and I know this is going to sound very cliche, it's going to really be about selling yourself, and marketing yourself, right? So the first step to that a lot of people don't take into account is knowing yourself, right? So understanding and really knowing and believing in what it is you bring, right? This is what I know I'm passionate about. This is what I know I'm capable of. And going into engaging with a potential employer with the mindset of,
This is what I am able and would love to bring to your organization, to do for your organization, right? And that does mean doing some sort of internal reckoning, and then highlighting that in ways that you catch people's attention. One thing that I have found can really help you stand out, even before you get to speak with someone, is to have a personal website, which can be completely free, right? You don't have to pay for a website. But if you have one, and it can be just one page that introduces you, that says, this is who I am, this is what I can do, this is what I'm capable of, and this is what I want to do for my next organization. And then if you highlight that website on your resume, right? That's something that's different. That's something that's unique. If they hop over and look at it, wow, this person knows what they want. They are ready to really bring something special. And they've taken some time to like highlight what they can bring. I think that's something very specific. But I think finding those ways to show employers that you know what you're capable of, and how you're ready to use that capability to enhance their goals, their missions, their values, things like that can really, really help you stand out in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And I always say, craft your story, and craft your story once. Yeah, so what is your story? Who are you? What drives you? What makes you tick? And once you do that, stick to it and be ready for multiple modes. So I love the website idea, Tiffaney. And I also feel like I am a cover letter lover. Love them. I read every single one. I work with other people, professionals who really dislike cover letters, don't ever read them. So I say you have to be prepared for everything. So figure out what your story is and be prepared to tell it in multiple ways. A website, a cover letter, the objectives, your LinkedIn, it all needs to say the same thing. Don't waste your time on, different stories. You have one story, it's you, what makes you special, and tell it once. And be prepared also, as you're thinking about, how do I do this in a networking environment coming up to the AZA conference, right? You have it the same thing on your digital business card. Yeah, make sure that whatever your story is, it synchronizes across multiple modes, because you never know who you're going to meet and how you want to tell your story. Be prepared to tell it in different ways.
So, of course, I have 1,000 questions for our fabulous panelists, but I would love to open it up and see if any of our guests have any questions for our panelists.
There's one in the chat.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
Great. Thank you. I missed it.
I don't know if Elizabeth wants to read it out, but if not, I'm happy to translate. But she says she's curious about what one gains and loses by moving into supervisory positions. As a museum educator, she loves dearly the opportunity to help others learn, and recognizes that professional progress would likely shift further away from those interactions. So what have you experienced by moving into supervisory positions?
That's a tough one. I'm going to jump in on this one just because I really experienced this, early in my career, much like Tiffaney, sort of get a summer job at Disneyland. But I really found that I love those interactions with the guests, and you sort of come to that point in your career where you have to decide, am I going to be a subject matter expert, or am I going to lead others? And I chose the path of leading others with a bit of a twist. I find that you can always schedule, and it has to be scheduled somehow, but even if you can schedule what I call refresh time. So when is that 15 minutes that you can go out and find a guest who looks lost and say, hey, can I help you with this? Or, have you seen this today? And honestly, gives you that same flavor, those 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever you can schedule, whether that's walking the hallways, walking the pathways, wherever you happen to be working, giving yourself that time to get back to your roots in that sense kind of refreshes that excitement, but that you know you are actually having such a great impact on the same, in the same way, and the people that you are working with and leading. So I try to do both, but I feel that crossroads decision, right? But only you know what's in your heart.
Mm-hmm. Kate, I think that is such such an important idea in thinking about how you continue to keep the parts that make you a people person as you move into a supervisory role or leadership roles, because you don't have to give it up. It's just
Right.
different. It's a different way of thinking about it. So, especially people who are educators, we get a lot of success and that like really good feeling of purpose when we're interacting with people. So you have to think about that supervisory role is the same idea as educating, but it's just at a different level, and how you can advocate for staff. And I think this opening doors for people is what you do as supervisors and as leaders. You're continuing to take everybody's strengths and putting them forward and promoting them on a bigger level. And I think that to me is something that I'm starting to see as I come into this new role. One of the things that I decided for myself about being a people person is that even though I'm in the seat where I got to be forward facing and outward facing, I'm still going to take time to meet the staff, know their names, know their stories. And so that was what I did for the first 2 weeks, was just get to know everybody. And I can name all of our staff by name. I know a little bit of their background. And that really matters for helping them know that I can be helpful to them moving forward. But it is a difference and it is a shift. And I think you're right. You have to decide, what are you really about? And if you want to move forward, you've got to figure out how you get the supervisory experience, because it will be very hard to move up in leadership without it.
I will third, but we're both what Kate and Elee said is it's about making a decision at a certain point. Do I want to stay here and keep doing this thing I love exactly in the way I've been doing it? Or do I want to move forward, elevate my particular status and find a way to elevate how to do this thing that I love? Because it's not going to be the exact same, but there is a way to change that. For example, I worked for so many years in customer service. I'm not technically in customer service anymore, but I do have customers. They just happen to be internal. And there are lots of different ways, many more ways than before, that I am able to serve those folks and give them what they need. And I have such incredible resources to do that now. So while I found customer service incredibly fulfilling, it was only fractionally fulfilling as what I'm able to do now, right? And I wouldn't know that unless I'd taken the chance to move up and discover what I could love about this new role and these new levels and this new work that is to be done, right? Because it's true that when you move up, you stop being responsible for that work and you start being responsible for the people who are responsible for that work. And it doesn't always sound as fun, right? Especially when you really, really adore that work. But you can find ways to be incredibly fulfilled by that as you help others learn and grow and develop in the work that you so loved, and even help other people fall in love with that work. So I think we're kind of all in agreement there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that segues. There's the chat is so rich, but I think that what you've all just talked about segues beautifully into Rosalio's first question, which is, how do you know when you're ready? Right? It's scary to move up. What if you fail? You've been succeeding at this level. What if I go up here and I can't do it? How do you know when you're ready?
Well, I would like to speak to that a little bit. The first thing I'd like to say is that failure is a part of success.
Mhm.
Okay. So understand that when you face new challenges, there probably will be failure. And that's okay as long as you take that failure as an opportunity to learn and grow and succeed on the next try, right? Like that's part of the process of growth. You don't always know for sure that you are ready. I think what you have to decide is if you're ready to face the challenge, right? Am I ready to commit to figuring out if I'm ready, to really testing myself? Am I ready to be okay being completely outside of my comfort zone and committing to 6 months or a year of figuring it out and really putting in the work, right? The truth is you're probably not ready, right? Very few people are. But taking on the challenge, doing the work, and putting the time in is how you get ready. That's how you gain that knowledge and expertise and experience, is by jumping in and doing it. So I doubt you'll ever feel like I'm absolutely ready. Because if you've already gotten to the point where you feel absolutely 100% ready, then it's probably past the time where you should have made that move, right? You're probably bored and frustrated by that time. It probably is going to be a little scary. It even should be a little bit. But are you resilient, and are you committed to facing those challenges and pushing through and finding the way to be successful? And if the answers to that question are yes, then you're ready.
Wow, Tiffaney, you are awesome. Let me know if you want to move to Washington. So I cannot echo that so much. It is about being willing to step up and take a little bit of a risk, but also being so self-aware of where you're at, willing to look at yourself and say, what do I have? What do I need? What do I want? And being willing to say yes to something that is going to give you enough of those opportunities. Even if you're still in your role, you have an opportunity to say, sure, I'll take that on, I'll figure that out, I want to know what that's like. I think that level of self-awareness, curiosity, and also in some of my experience, it was people saying no to me and knowing that I was willing and interested to take on the task, and then disagreeing, saying, fine, if you're going to say no, I'm going to show you. So I have a little bit of that spirit too, which is like, you're not going to tell me no. I know I'm ready to try something. Let me try it.
Yeah. And I don't underestimate the power of those around you. So if you're going to take this step and you've got it in you and you want to do it, to Tiffaney and Elise's point, make sure that those around you, you sort of surround yourself with some folks who can help, right? So if you've had a bad day, you make a mistake, who's around you that you can talk with, whether that's colleagues in your organization, whether that's colleagues outside of your direct organization, friends, family. Make sure that you surround yourself with an outlet, because it is challenging and stressful for that 6 to 12 months where you're making that transition. You need to have a support network that believes in you and that can help you through that. Don't try to go through that alone.
Yes, absolutely. And one thing I like to remind people is that when you're selecting people to be that support network, choose carefully. Make sure that you are selecting individuals who have like a can-do attitude. I know that sounds cliche, that have a possibility mindset, right? And a growth mindset, not individuals who enjoy wallowing in negativity and who enjoy finding blame for circumstances and then making excuses for why things can't be done. Find those individuals who are ready to, take the time, the few minutes to listen to you vent, and then are willing to ask you the question, okay, I'm glad you were able to get off that off your chest, and I'm here for you. Now, what are we going to do to overcome? What are we going to do to push through? How can I support you in making it work, right? Rather than someone who's going to just, for you, yeah, this is so hard. It's just too hard. They need to fix it for you, or somebody else needs to do something. Make sure you're selecting those people who are really uplifting, who are helping you be a problem solver, who are helping you work through things and overcome, and not just kind of sit and wallow in self-pity, because those individuals are trying to be helpful, but it ends up having an opposite effect. So just choose wisely that support system.
So I would like to go to a question. There are great questions in the chat, and I fear that we're not going to get to all of them unless everybody'd like to stay for the entire afternoon, because this has been, it continues to be an incredible conversation. You know, we've been talking a little bit about sort of your career growth. It sounds to me we've talked a bit about being your authentic self in your job and really bringing your passion and your enthusiasm. And I think we're all here because what we want in our teams is a diversity of authentic human beings who are themselves and who bring their best every single day to the job. So I'd like to go to Jess, who, Jess, I'm going to read this for you, but feel free to just hop in if you have any additional questions or context. Jess would like to know, now that we're all becoming leaders or interested in becoming leaders, is there a way to influence hiring practices, such as training of hiring teams to address implicit biases that support the dominant cultures, that will actually create a pathway for different identities? And can you three panelists speak to some of the things that you could recommend from different organizational levels? Jess, is there anything else you'd like to add to that? I'm going to give you 3 seconds, and if you don't pop off, then I'm going to have our panelists start talking.
Hi, no, that kind of sums it all up. Just kind of wanting to, you know, I think we have people who are at different stages in their careers and different levels of the organization. And so just thinking about ways to really empower folks from those different levels to start creating those pathways.
Okay, I'm going to start.
There you go.
This is so important, and I have seen it work really well, and I've seen it work really poorly, and something that I am working on trying to figure out how we're going to do here in this new place that I'm in. Understanding bias and all of the different ways that it shows up in your hiring process, from the kinds of questions you ask, the assumptions that you make about what needs, you know, like what kind of education or background a person needs, that what it need, well, like what you need to do the job. I think it's like job description all the way through the process. Being really thoughtful about what and how you are working, what you're looking for, and giving people a chance. I can't stress that enough. Just really quickly, was in a hiring process and noticed that some people were being really critical about a particular set of things. I can't actually remember the specific details, but I really called that into question, said, I still think we need to give this person a chance. And that's the person we ended up hiring, because I was trying to look beyond these other things that really weren't critical to the job. And that really makes the difference. So I think it's understanding what the work is and how a person approaches the work is what matters more than anything else.
I agree. I second that. And, you know, I'd like to emphasize again that a lot of it is about really educating your leaders and your managers about bias, about what it is, about the fact that we all have it, about all the different types of bias, right? At least 19 different types, right? You know, how it shows up. And also being transparent about that from a personal perspective, being a little vulnerable, right? So when I lead in a training about inclusive leadership and we're talking about bias, one of the things I have to speak to is, let me tell you about a time when my bias showed up when we were in an interview process, right? And how I had to catch myself and step back out of my bias and what that looked like and what it felt like to sort of challenge myself and to come to terms with the fact that and face my own bias, right? And come to terms with the fact that it was there. And that if I wasn't very intentional about stepping out of it, I could make a wrong choice, or I could turn away from someone who might be the perfect candidate, things like that. So I think education has to be a huge, huge, huge part of that. And the vulnerability and transparency helps people to relate to that and be willing to accept that bias exists in general and also within them, so that then they can start to look past it and overcome it.
Yeah. I agree. I am so lucky, actually. I'm also fairly new to my role. And when I stepped into this organization, one of the required trainings for a new hire was bias training. And I thought, oh, well, look at this. Usually it's sort of the people person that's saying, hey, folks, let's talk about inclusive leadership and bias, et cetera. And I continue to be impressed by the organization and the way that we train our new hires and set the expectation up front of how we expect inclusivity to live in the organization. And the next step, the ultimate next step, I think, is then ensuring that we are comfortable calling each other out on it. So it's one thing for me to step back and say, ooh, I have a bias that you have to have a bachelor's degree to do this job. Well, do you really, right? So those kinds of things that you catch yourself doing. But more importantly, when someone on the interview panel calls me on it and says, Kate, do they really have to have a bachelor's degree? I'm like, you're right. You really don't, right? So I feel like the organizations that are really emphasizing this piece, first of all, those are the ones you want to work in. And then secondly, those that are able to really open up those lines of communication so the leadership has the comfort level with each other to call each other on it. Super important.
So one of the things that makes me think about what you all have just said is the word bias, which can make some people's shoulders go up to their ears and become very tense. And I don't like that word. And what are you saying negative about me when you talk about bias? And I think that shows up in a lot of different ways. It's related to one of the questions that Courtney had in the chat about being a woman who is passionate and motivated, and that gets the label aggressive, and they're, you know, pushing for your due consideration can sometimes cause a backlash. How do you get around that? How do you work with that?
So you're asking, how do you work with sort of the pushback that you get when you are pushing for the things that you find important and the things that you're really passionate about that the organization may not deem as important or may not want to invest in?
Yeah, like the fact that there is an automatic, in many cases, not always, an automatic resistance to talking about things like implicit bias. Now, I know the Birmingham Zoo well, and I know that it's an institution that is very inclusive and open and all that, but you're in a community that can be a little bit more socially conservative.
Yes.
How does the profession bring up these issues without automatically having that door close in front of us?
Yeah. I recently did have a conversation about that, about trying to talk about not just bias, but diversity and inclusion and equity in general, because these are now in a lot of pockets of our culture becoming trigger words that shut down a conversation or close a door. So you have to figure out how to talk around them, and what does that look like? And I do think that you do need to be aware of what it is you're working with, right? Of who it is you're trying to communicate with. And it is worth strategizing how to speak to these things and pulling out specific words that do make people sort of, you know, shrivel up and tense up, right? And so, like, if we need to talk about bias, you know, it may be worth saying, hey, in the human mind, there is this thing where we tend to associate certain traits as good, other traits as negative, where we tend to be more favorable to the things that are very similar to what we already know or similar to ourselves, right? It's just the way that the human brain operates. But when we're doing business, when we want to do business fairly, when we want to give everybody a fair shot, we need to work toward overcoming some of these ways that the human mind typically works, right? So, and then you lead into sort of that education and that conversation. It's talking around the thing. And it's a little bit of mental and verbal gymnastics, right? Because it's like, it's bias. Let's just say bias. Except, yes, people aren't going to always be receptive to that. So sometimes it is worth taking the time and making the effort to do the mental and verbal gymnastics, to introduce a concept in a way that it doesn't utilize the words that are triggering or can be divisive, and it doesn't automatically make them think, oh, you're talking about me, you're accusing me of something. No, I'm talking about a phenomenon that exists, right? It's a thing that exists. So let's talk about this thing that exists and how not to let ourselves be overly influenced by this thing that exists. And so that's one of the ways I've started to kind of negotiate some of those conversations. I think that spoke to what you're asking. I hope so.
Beautifully, eloquently, yes.
I hate to say that we're coming up on our last few minutes together, but believe it or not, we are. We've had some comments in the chat about how folks could listen to this conversation all day, which is echoing what I said. So I hope that we get to extend this conversation at some point. But I would like to ask, I'd like to end on sort of a very practical question. We started this conversation as tips for job hunting and networking at conferences. And so I'd like to finish with, as we're, and we've had several questions in the chat around networking as well. And so as we're moving into this conference season, what advice would our panelists have for effectively networking at big professional gatherings like this so that we can really maximize our time and our opportunity to get our names out there?
I'm gonna echo what Kate said earlier, is know your story and be willing to figure out how you're gonna squish that into a conversation. So you have to be willing to say hello to somebody, say something interesting so that it doesn't sound like you're totally pitching yourself right off the bat, but just to say, hey, this is great. What have you had at this conference? It's been really great. And then figure out how to weave your story into that conversation, but more without being pushy. It's much more about sharing who you are and what you love and what you know, so that other people know this is what you're looking for. People recommend people to jobs based on who they know, and it goes back to what was in the report. You have to say the names of people in the room when they're not there, which means you have to have somebody who wants to say your name. So you have to be compelling and interesting to talk to, not pushy. And it's really complicated to think about that. But I think if you have a story, like, this is sort of what I'm about. I always ask people, where have you been? Where are you going? Where are you now? That is a way to think about framing your pitch, your elevator pitch, your pickup line, whatever it is you want to think about for what works for you at a conference.
Yeah, I'll echo that and say it's not a natural thing for me at large conferences, right, to sort of strike up a conversation. But something that helped me that I learned a few years ago was people like to help others. We just do. And so when you do your research and you know that Jose is going to be there and Sally is going to be there, and those are the two people that you want to meet. Also think about what can you bring to the conversation for Jose and Sally that will be interesting and helpful for them, right? What can you give to them? So networking isn't just about what you get from them, but what can I give to them? Like, Jose, I saw your article on XYZ, and I totally agree with that, but I was thinking, have you thought about this, right? Can you bring Jose something new? Sally, I would love to follow up with you on XYZ that you mentioned. I had this idea around how we might do it better, whatever it is. But what can you give to the person that it isn't just so you feel more comfortable asking for their connection, right? That sort of flips the conversation a little bit. Instead of just you going, "Hi, I'm Kate, can you hire me?" It's more about, "Hey, I'm Kate, I have a great story that I'd love to share with you, but I heard your story and I'd like to contribute this to your story first." Super powerful.
I will add to all of that, which is spot on, that you are going to need to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone. If you are not, like me, and deemed an aggressive extrovert, those are the words they used. It's fine. If that's not you, then yeah, it's gonna be a little uncomfortable, but it's worth it. Remember why you're there, why you're needing to do this, right? One of the things that I have had to do is literally drag people after sessions and after the day's business ends, sort of drag them to the social aspects of things, right? Because that is where you are going to make these connections. So you don't come out of sessions and go to your room. You need to be in the spaces where other people are. You need to go to the mixers. You need to mingle. You need to walk up to people and introduce yourself. Ask them where they're from. Tell them where you're from. Find that common ground to talk to, as to it, like Kate was discussing, right? If you know this person and this person knows that person, say, "Hey, can you please do an introduction for me to this person?" That's what networking is. It's bringing people together. And like Kate said, people want to do that, right? That's part of the reason we're all here. Another handy tip that I like to give people is, be prepared to give people your information, right? Offer that every chance you can. I recommend, even if you have physical cards, I recommend a digital card because it already puts you into their phone. Also, you can put a photo with that. So they don't look at your information but can't remember who you are. It puts a face with it. So your face and your information are in their phone. And collect the information from everybody you speak with. At the end of the night, take notes. This person we were at this place, we talked about this. This person, we were at this place, we talked about this. And when that conference is over, email all those people. "Hey, it was so great meeting you at the membership managers mixer on Tuesday night. I really enjoyed our conversation about how to expand, member benefits to bring more members into the organization. I'd love to keep in touch and let you know any other ideas I come up with. And if you would do the same, I'd absolutely love that. I look forward to seeing you, speaking with you or seeing you again soon." Right?
I feel
So
so
it's not just
called
that
out.
one time.
I feel so called out by Tiffaney because she has dragged me to social events at conferences when I was trying to sneak back to my room to go. But you're absolutely right. And I would say that, it is hard for people like me, and it sounds like you, Kate, to do that thing where you walk up to somebody and say hello and introduce yourself. That's scary. Having a friend like Tiffaney, and I'm doing this on purpose, is helpful because she's a bridge for me. Like, I know that Tiffaney's not scared to do that. And so if I go talk to her at the bar, I will get to meet other people through her, and I won't have to do it alone. So if you can find somebody, you know, find a co-pilot that can help you bridge that, get over that part of having to say hi first. I think that's a wonderful opportunity.
That's why I say pickup line. You just need to
Yes.
have think of it for all of you who are in museum education or interpretation, think about it as how you engage the audience. It's the same thing. You just need to have a different focus on what your outcome is.
Yeah, these have all been, oh, go ahead, Kate. Yep.
I was going to say, and just remember, I mean, this is once a year, you have this great opportunity in front of you, once a year. And it is work, people. It is work. And you should be exhausted, and your feet should hurt, and you should be tired from smiling. But if you do that and you do the notes that Tiffany's talking about and you follow up, it will pay dividends. If you don't leave there exhausted, you didn't get your money's worth.
I agree. Absolutely.
So we're coming up to our last minute together, and I'd like to sort of, first of all, thank everybody so much for this great conversation. 2 plugs. One, Devra has been so kind as to put herself out there and introduce herself in the chat as a person who has a website and is potentially looking for some career opportunities. I have worked with Devra in the past at Smithsonian, and I can vouch for her personally. So if anybody's looking for an exhibit designer, interpretive work, we've got somebody who's looking. I'd also like to put in a quick plug for some of the things that Canopy is doing at the AZA conference. Yes, you have to be an introverted extrovert. I am the biggest extroverted introvert. I know Tiffaney is, I would not call you aggressive, I'd call you joyfully extroverted. It is work, right? But we also do want y'all to take care of yourselves. So we are offering some yoga classes on Monday morning in person if you're going to be at the conference. And if you're not really interested in doing an early morning yoga class with other people, on Tuesday morning, we're doing a virtual yoga class that you can take from your hotel room. So this is an opportunity to refresh, to get your own sort of wellness and put your head in the right place. We're also going to be doing, if you're a crafter, I'm a knitter, I'm bringing knitting. We're going to do a crafty hour together at some point. So keep an eye out for some of these sort of more relaxed opportunities to meet and mingle and also take care of your own sort of recharging your batteries and taking care of your own wellness while also being out there and spending time with folks. And Elizabeth said maybe some conference mixer introvert extrovert stickers. We've actually joked about that before, Elizabeth, at the AZA conference, and there would just be like half of the conference sitting in a corner with their coffee not talking to one another, which sounds ideal for a lot of people. But we've got opportunities to bring folks together. So I think on behalf of Canopy, thank you all so much for this amazing conversation, and a special thanks to Tiffaney, Elee, and Kate for your wisdom, for your advice, for your candid perspectives. This has just been so fantastic. We look forward to engaging with you all. If you're going to be at the conference, we will be there. We'd love to see you. We'd love to network. We will open the doors for you and bring you along in those conversations. So just let us know who you need to meet and we'll introduce you. And we're looking forward to seeing you all soon in person or virtually. Liza, Lori, anything else we need to cover before we say thanks and goodbye?
I think you nailed it. Elise, thank you all so much. This has been great. Rosalio suggested way up in the chat somewhere, maybe a part 2, and I think maybe a part 2, maybe a part 3. So yeah, looking forward to seeing many of you at the conference, and otherwise looking forward to seeing you on the next webinar.